Well, it's local election time coming up, and there are a couple of important, you know, positions, especially up for grabs as well. We've had increasingly over the past couple of years more and more regional mayoralties. Now, I have always argued, especially for Yorkshire, rather than having four separate mayors, which we're going to end up with, we should have always had just one Yorkshire region. But unfortunately, because Sheffield wanted to be special, and yes, it is Sheffield that was the problem, we ended up like this. Thank you very much, Sheffield. Trust me, inter-regional Yorkshire rivalry on politics is a very it's a very interesting topic and subject. We've talked about it very briefly before. However, none of you ever watched that video, hence why I've never done anything more about it. But it is a thing if you want to go watch it or read more about it. However, with, of course, these more regional mayoralships, we're getting one in Hull with one called Hyimca. I know Simca for South Yorkshire, Hyimca for East Yorkshire, and Wimca, I think it's being called for West Yorkshire. And Iska or Edka, I think it's being called for East Yorkshire. Anyway, weird times. But yes, these obviously more mayoral positions, they're being given even more powers that they are going to be able to use and excise. So these positions and these extra mayoral orderships, certainly under Andy Burnham, certainly we've seen over here in sort of in Simca, the South Yorkshire regional mayoralship as well. We've seen very good advancements by what that regional mayoralship has done. Andy Burnham pretty much leading the way in taking public ownership on bringing buses and public transport back under their public ownership. We're seeing a lot of the Labour mayors run on that in very much in particular because it has had a big bonus on the the whole beeline stuff. We're seeing that happen now in South Yorkshire. The super tram coming back under public ownership. I've talked more about Oliver Coppard should really go all in on that and fulfill the promise of Supertram, get it going up into sort of Barnsley, get it going over to Rotherham, to Doncaster, even though it does tend to go to Rotherham at the moment. However, it's tram train stuff, but it should go all the way into Doncaster, and you can expand the route even more over South Yorkshire. It would be great to see. But as we said, there are more regional mayoralships, and of course, people constantly talking about, oh my word, how popular are reform. I've said this before. If they're so popular, why haven't they won more by-elections? Why are they just continually being in these by-elections paper tigers? We'll see what that really means. Now, of course, they are going to win seats. Inevitably, they are going to win seats. But always remember, the height of UKIP was like 500. If they never get more than that, then what threat really were they? And then, of course, as I've also said, and we'll be looking at this in a moment as well, the Lib Dems. I think the Lib Dems are probably going to be, I would say, the ultimate winners in this upcoming contest. But anyway, I'm going to have a look at two different mayoral contests ongoing, one over in Hull, and the other, of course, down south in Bath. Two very different places, with two very different, interesting sort of political grounds going on there. So again, be interesting to see what happens, of course, on May the 1st with these mayoralships. So before we do go into that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Of course, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on them into this. So this coming from the BBC, the title of Reform and Greens aim high in volatile mayoral contests. So voters now appear to be in a restless mood as Labour faces its first electoral test since its landslide general election victory. Reform UK is surging in the polls, and the Lib Democrats and Greens are also now seeking to capitalise on voters' disenfranchisement with Labour and the Conservatives in the English local elections. But Can they turn their poll ratings into real power on May the 1st? That always is the question. And here's the thing with Reform UK, you look at the by elections, they've not. They've not turned it into anything real. You look at all those current councillors they have, none of them have been, the vast majority of them, should we say, really, have never been put to electoral test. Some party. You know, you've got 4 MPs and they're fighting like rats in a sack. You've got, Rupert Lowe suing Nigel Farage, which is going to be, I think, so much fun to watch as they absolutely rip into each other. And it's so weird that last time I talked about that, I had people in there. Oh, don't worry, they'll sort it out. No, they're not. They're not going to suddenly, shake hands and be friends again. I think those people thinking that are fooling themselves, fooling themselves quite severely if you think that. But anyway, back into this. We, of course, went to test the waters in these 2 mayoral contests in very different parts of the country. In the spring sunny mood in Hull does not, of course, scream political drama. Families currently in busy shops and cafes, and a very salty breeze from the Humber cutting through the heat rising now from the cobblestones. Beneath this calm, the race to become the first mayor of Hull and East Yorkshire combined authority is on a knife edge. And the result is likely to be a lot for us about the very feeble and fractured state of British politics in 2025. The current political map of Hull and East Yorkshire Combined Authority, or HENCYA, is a patchwork covering over 6,000 people on the north side of the Humber Estuary. Labour dominates the city with all 3 of its MPs, but the council has been run by the Lib Dems for the past 3 years. The Conservatives remain strong in market towns and villages of the East Riding of Yorkshire, returning all 3 areas of its MPs, making up now the largest group on the council. Conservative leader Kimmy Badenoch has warned the party of, quote, an extremely difficult local elections. But the local Tory candidate, Anne Hartley, is confident, of course. She's got to. And you're about to see why in a moment. Hanley, who leaves the East Riding Yorkshire Council under minority rule, admits the Conservative had a very bad press after a record defeat in the general election last year. Oh, yeah, it was just bad press. Bad press. But people are looking at the person rather than the politics in this, she argues. Oh, yeah. Ignore the Conservative sign behind me and vote for me. Yeah. Then why are you running on as a Conservative, considering all the? Yeah. It's going to be interesting to watch what happens there, and that's for certain. But this seat also has a major target for reform. It has selected the local golden boy, Luke Campbell, the Olympic champion weight bantam boxer in London 2012, as its candidate. A self-styled political outsider born and bred in Hull, Campbell says he can, quote, bridge the gap between government and an area that's, quote, being ignored. Except what experience does this guy have in politics? Like, and bear in mind, a lot of people think that's a very unfair question when it gets asked of them. However, if you are running for a political position, you should expect that question. But this guy, if you go look at his interviews, gets asked this question so many times and seems to be absolutely insulted that he gets even asked that question. But he says stuff like this of Campbell echoes the very same echo the very same success of Donald Trump, now trying to capitalize on the strong sense of voter disillusionment in the area. He said, we need to make Britain great again, he says. Really? You're running on the Donald Trump stance? Considering what's going on over in America, do you really think that's the best strategy to run on? And you wonder why this guy gets frustrated in interviews and on the hustings when he gets asked about this? Gee, I wonder why. Anyway, local artist Nellie Richards says he believes reform could, of course, take the mayoralty. Richards owned a shop in Hull's main shopping parade, framed by empty units, says that people want to, quote, send a message to the major parties. And of course, that's a big problem. Sending a message doesn't always necessarily work out quite right how should we say, people intended to in that. Put off, of course, by Labour's recent record in government, lifelong Labour voters Jill Crook and Jane O'Neill from Hensley say that they may vote reform for the very first time. O'Neill says that she has been hit by the winter fuel payment cuts and, of course, Labour rejecting any compensation for women hit by charges to the state pension age. She says, I keep thinking we haven't got enough money to do everything for everybody. Ms. O'Neill said, adding that maybe we need to pull up the drawbridge, even if just for a little bit. Of course, as long as they get their money, they're fine with that drawbridge pulling. As long as they get theirs, that seems to how very much that comment comes across. There is, of course, a very definite sense of anyone but reform, a vote, of course, mobilizing as well. Keith Wells, the 70-year-old retiree, sums up the statement of many, saying, Luke Campbell, what does he know about politics? Again, this guy has been floundering whenever he's been asked that question. A lifelong, of course, Labour voter says that he will, of course, use his vote to get someone who at least is a bit more experienced into office. Hull was once a rock-solid Labour territory. And, of course, their candidate, Margaret Pinder, would have been, of course, the natural home for voters flocking to reform. But after less than, of course, a year in government, Labour is now, grip is at least is loosening. Alfie Appleton, who owns Hull's independent clothing shop and, of course, the Chinese laundry, says that Labour aren't my best friends at the moment. He is politically homeless after his natural party Labour, quote, kicked us in the teeth with the budget this year by raising national insurance contributions while cutting small business rate relief and raising the minimum wage. Mike Ross, the Liberal Democrat leader of Hull City Council, the candidate for mayor, who also believes his party is now best placed to scoop up the votes. I agree with him. I agree with him on that. I keep on saying this. I think at this local election, the Lib Dems are going to capitalize on that. And then, as I've always said, if Ed Davey, if his big plan is to replace the Conservatives as the main party of opposition, and it's stuff like this, next year where you get the Senate, even the Scottish elections, probably very important time for them as well. And then, of course, the big council election in 2028. Now, all those are big key points for them. And if they can build on those successes, come up, be seen as, oh, these guys are not just, the third party anymore. They're not just the other third option. They are an actual party that could be good as an opposition party, but also seen as a government in waiting, then Ed Davey has potentially achieved his every option. Now, so far, he seems to be doing some good work on that front. Will he pull it off? Well, currently, now, more so than ever, is his time to do that. Will he be able to pull it off? Well, time will tell in a couple of years' time. But as they say, a week is a long time in politics. And to be honest, 4 years and a half is a practical eternity. And a lot can happen between now and then. But we'll see. So his party believes the best place to scoop up votes. He said there's a lot more people who are against reform than pro. Given how well we do across the patch in the local elections, we are probably now the best placed party to stop reform from winning. The new mayoralship was established under the previous Tory administration back in 2023 to push powers out of Westminster, copying the blueprint of London Mayor Sadiq Khan and the Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham. Labour, of course, planned to expand the programme to every English region to simplify local government and to boost economic growth, which again, it has proven to work very, very well in doing that. The Henke Mayor will be given a 13.3 million year budget with very key responsibilities to oversee local transport and, of course, growth plans. Growth plans being probably the most important. This is something that a lot of people really overlook. A lot of the growth we've seen in South Yorkshire, certainly over Manchester, have come from that regional mayoralship level. And that has filtered down even to the local councils. So we've been seeing a lot of good things because of that in this region. Because of that, we'll see what happens on that. But back to this. Robin Halstead says his party, the Yorkshire Party, are, quote, the only group not shackled by national allegiances. So would put his money and the people and the region first. And again, the Yorkshire Party, bless the little cotton socks, but they've never got anywhere really serious. on that front, but there you go. Anyway, whoever, of course, becomes mayor will, of course, have very big economic challenges to tackle. Hull is, of course, one of the most economically deprived areas of England. Again, very true indeed. East Ridings is one of the fastest growing economies in the country, but analysis now by the Institute of Government has found that productivity across the whole region still remains below the national average. And this is a constant problem you see, not here, but everywhere else in the country. You've got this really good growth, but the productivity is a massive, massive drag. Things could be so much better, but you need that investment in public transport. You need the investment in schools, in skills, all kinds of stuff that needs to be invested in. This is why I am looking forward to when we finally get to see that strategic industrial plan. I think will be really good. So, like I say, when that comes out, we'll be going over it. Anyway, back to this. But of course, just 150 miles away, in the northwest of England, of northwest region of England, another political train looks different but just as volatile. Labour make up the local majority of local MPs, but the party is, of course, reeling now from the rape and child abuse allegations against the incumbent Dan Norris, who was elected as a Labour candidate, but has just been expelled from the party while police investigate. Even before news of Norris's arrest broke, Labour candidate Helen Godwin was now pitching herself now as a clean break from a previous regime that put the West of England Combined Authority of Welker in special measures due to infighting. Godwin, a Bristol city councillor, told the BBC, "I would be operating an authority that is inclusive for lots of discussions, room for disagreement, but actually getting now to the hard work done." Despite some tough decisions, Godwin says she does not see a great shift away from Labour since last July's election. The Liberal Democrats and the Greens both sent MPs to Parliament from the constituencies in that area. Lib Dem Ollie Hallman and Green candidate Mary Page see themselves now as the closest challengers to Labour. Back in 2021, Page stood as a Lib Dem candidate mayor from Bristol, a role she later campaigned to, of course, abolish before joining the Greens back in 2023. She argues her shift to the Greens just reflects a journey of many voters have been on, saying, "I'm having people tell me all the time I was a Labour supporter, but now I'm joining the Greens," she said. Not just voting, but actively saying they're joining. One of these many new mothers, Phoebe Bracewell, says, who says she wants to, quote, see more focus on sustainability of the planet. Aaron Banks, of course, framed for his £1 million donation to Nigel Farage's UKIP and, of course, prominent role in the Brexit referendum, has attracted attention with his decision to, of course, stand for Reform UK. Independent councillor Ian Scott has meanwhile told the BBC there is a, quote, an appetite in the independent-minded west of England for someone outside of the full party system. And remember, the last time we held these elections, back in 2021, the biggest winner, biggest growth out of all the other parties was independents. People who aren't part of a certain political party. But it's just, where then do these people go? Where then do these groups go to? So will we see a big increase again in independents? Will we see a reduce in them as maybe you see other parties take votes? Who knows? Again, time will tell. We'll see what happens when we look at the results. So the west of England is, of course, the most productive region outside London, according to Welker's own analysis. But while the economy, of course, looks good on paper, workers in the area contend with, of course, wages now have flatlined over the past 15 years, while house prices have increased to 10 times the average earnings. Plans for trams and underground trains in Bristol, one of the largest cities in Europe, have not, of course, doesn't have a mass transport system, of course, fell apart last year amid political bickering. Gee, I wonder which party was responsible for that political bickering. I'm sure it wasn't the Greens, but you know. Anyway, anger, of course, over the slow buses and the gridlock roads is, of course, very palpable when you talk to voters. The bus service is awful. The price is exorbitant. NHS Traffic Marshal Craig Williams says, while he supports reform, he plans to use his vote to oust the Green Party, who he blames now for clogging the streets through the low traffic scheme in the east of the city. The Greens now face the blowback from the voters over their choices made by their councillors, the biggest group on Bristol Council, including drop plans to collect bin waste bins every 4 weeks. Gee, not easy once you actually get into government. Easy criticizing, but once you're in, gee, people start to realize, are they really as good as they say they are? Anyway, political, of course, disengagement is another major factor in this election. The main response to, of course, questions about the mayoral race was, of course, a big shrug of the shoulders. Turnout for the last Worcester mayor was at 36% and not exactly expected to improve this time around, given there are no other local elections in this area. The council elections in Hull last year saw a turnout of just 21%. Again, absolute dire. Absolutely dire when it's 21%. That means potentially you are looking at, 100 votes, you could end up being a councillor. And who's going to go out and vote? Well, it'll be those who are most politically motivated to go out and vote in these elections. So these low turnouts are what is driving, I think, our, current political landscape. You look at the last election, again, biggest group of non-voters. Who was it? People who didn't turn out to vote. You look at the Brexit referendum. More people in that referendum did not vote than actually voted. Political disenfranchisement is a real problem in this country. And I will tell you this now, honestly, no party is addressing it. They might say they are, but no party is addressing it. Not the Labour, not the Conservatives, not the Lib Dems, not Reform, not the Greens. No party is actually seriously addressing it. But we've got to have that conversation sooner or later about how we actually deal with that. No party is addressing it. Anyway, election experts Colin Rattlings and Professor Michael Fasher argue that, of course, low turnout is creating a very chaotic political landscape, potentially handing power to small but driven groups of voters. Again, very true. That is what will happen. The result of these contests could then ripple beyond the mayoral counts for actual powers over local transport, of course, to training budgets. The morality will, of course, give the winners a platform, viability, and even momentum to shape the political debate in years before the next general elections. These races could be a very up and close look at where nationalist politics go next. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens on that front. But yeah, very interesting times at the moment on these local elections. Obviously, when we get the results, if we get anything more interesting stories about stuff going on, I will, of course, talk about it. But of course, sometimes when you do these local stories, no one really cares outside of that region. But there you go. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.